Good morning to all of you who have gathered here today to craft a better future for our community. I don't think of any of you as disabled. I'm going to break fresh ground by coining a new word, the divabled, short for the diversely enabled, for that is who we really are. I'd like to thank especially the new Mayor of Frankston, Councillor Sandra Mayer, who has joined us and honoured us with her presence today. And before proceeding any further, I would like to acknowledge the Bunurong people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. I would also like to pay respect to the elders past and present of the Bunurong Nation and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people who may be present. One of the outstanding stories of Australian politics in 2012 has been what I would call the rocky progress made to actually begin laying the paving stones of the road to a national disability insurance scheme. That heart-stopping press conference where half the premiers refused to have anything to do with the federal approach to its construction, followed by one of those rare sights in politics, a change of policy in double-quick time, brought about by intense public pressure and perhaps a little shame, means that there will be a national scheme initially to be trialled locations in South Australia, Tasmania and the Barwon Valley due west across the water. Geelong is behind you. Fortunately, no one is under any illusion that the rest of this decade, until the scheme is properly established in 2018 or 2019, is not going to be a time of sweetness and pure harmony, but one of hard-headed forging of a livable future. Even now, the government's way is not guaranteed to be safe from challenge or the advocates of change. Some of those advocates hope a coalition government will be in power before long. Others raise warning cries from within the ranks. One such is British funding modeller Simon Duffy, who has branded Canberra's way archaic, bureaucratic, fiscally irresponsible, unsustainable and patriarchal. But most people, it seems, have recognised the start of this road paving for what it is, progress and better than nothing. The actual direction the road takes before it reaches its destination will have to be adjusted according to the contours of the political territory through which it runs, including more than the odd rockfall and other unforeseeable obstacles. But at least the destination is known, an approximate idea of the travelling time is possessed by most of us, and not a moment too soon, we are on our way. I'm much more of an optimist than Duffy. I agree with him that those who've endorsed the NDIS may not know what they've let themselves in for, but in my view that unknown element is all upside. It is going to come as a great shock to the comfortable classes when the divabled, previously known as the disabled, inherit the earth, as we surely will. It's clear to me as I look around that evolution's master plan is even now forming a superior race more fitted to the world we inhabit. Think about it. While track and field fans wonder if in their lifetimes or their grandchildren's the men's marathon will ever be run in under 2 hours, that's a slow, slow day for wheelchair driving speed demons. The world record for completing a marathon in a drag race that makes the chair I'm seated in now look like an East German Trabant of the old school is 1 hour 20 minutes. That's what I call fast. You are the last people who need someone like me to come and tell you what some of the most common misconceptions about the disabled are. But for the record, I would like to focus our minds on a couple of them. The first misconception, or let me call it a fallacy, about the disabled can be summed up in the thought, not often expressed openly, this person is disabled, so I shouldn't assume he or she has any particular capacity. I have an example fresh from my journey here this morning. I was waiting for a taxi in the rain on Glenferrie Road, Hawthorn, having ordered the taxi, when and sheltering under the eaves of a bank on the street corner when a woman stopped in front of me and said, "Are you stuck waiting for the rain to stop?" And I said, "I don't quite know what you mean." And she said, "Oh, would you like me to push you across the road?" Well, I was brought up to be polite. I'm unfailingly polite. Mum were already here, she would probably dispute that, but no, really. And I said, "Well, actually, no, I don't want to cross the road, and if I did, my hands are perfectly capable of doing that." And I believe, in fact I hope, that she is still reflecting on what that possibly means, even at this moment. The assumption that because I can't move my legs it would be difficult or impossible for me to cross a road or open a door is preposterous. How many people do you see opening doors with their legs? I mean, really. If that is a measure of disability, then the NDIS is going to benefit every Australian. So, if you can't walk, people treat you as if your functioning limbs are useless too. Or if you're blind, they may speak slowly to you, on the assumption you must be hard of hearing as well. I'm sure you have your own favourite examples. But in recounting one of my own, I'd like to introduce you to Elsie. This is not Elsie. No. Elsie was a lady that I met in South Africa when I was living there a few years ago. Despite the impression some people have, I don't think that the world revolves around me. In fact, as somebody who's been travelling to many countries and in the wheelchair for more than 20 years now, quite the opposite. I've been revolving around the world. In the middle of the 2000s, living in Johannesburg, I was on a day off work and had headed down to the local shopping centre to replenish supplies. So I've been through the supermarket like a guided missile, and there I am travelling down to the next floor by lift, when in walks Elsie to the lift, a housewife of a certain age with a vacant look on her face. I bid her good morning, and ignoring that greeting, she zeroes in on what's suddenly occupied her mind. "What happened to you?" she asks, straight up. In case you're wondering, I knew her name was Elsie because it was written on the silver name tag that she obviously felt was a helpful thing to wear. "What happened to you?" she asked, just like that. But after a while, you get to be somewhat expert at decoding these cryptic statements. What she meant to say, of course, was, "Would you care to tell me, a total stranger, the details of whatever excruciating trauma, accident, calamity wrenched your life off course? Because I'm sure it would be fascinating." "Well, to start with," I drawled, "let me see, the alarm clock rang the same time it does every day, but I'd only had 5 hours sleep, so I rolled over and caught another half hour's shut-eye." Elsie's eyes widened. "Then I got up, went to the toilet, let me see, I washed my hands, did my ablutions and headed to the kitchen. I took the cornflakes out of the cupboard, poured milk over them, thought about adding honey, and then realised I didn't have any, fired up the toaster, turned on the radio." By this point her jaw had visibly dropped, and I checked the flow of my recitation of another ordinary day in my mundane round of existence. After a dramatic pause, I delivered my punchline as an anticlimax. "Oh, I see now." I interrupted my own silence. "When you say, 'What happened to you,' you don't mean this morning. You're talking about the wheelchair, aren't you?" "Yes," squeaked Elsie, sensing she just might have intruded onto private territory. "Well," I said with a smile on my face, "I had a fall from a building about 15 years ago and landed on my feet. But I've had a whole new life since then, so it's nothing to worry about, okay?" At this instant, the lift doors opened and I went on my way with a breezy, "Have a good day." I think this neatly sums up the second fallacy entertained about the so-called disabled, that we spend our lives fixated on our particular disability rather than our multiple capabilities. I could never build a house. As a builder, I'm disabled. I couldn't follow any mathematics course beyond Year 11, and if I were told to explain a theory studied in a university maths course, I'd be at a near total loss. Therefore, as a tertiary level mathematician, I'm in the disabled category. Worth considering at this point is the observation made by the Stella Young on her ABC Ramp-Up site in an article published in mid-November and headed "Reporting It Right, How the Government Got It Wrong." Stella takes to task those who tell her that she's not a disabled person, but a person with a disability, which is an example of something called person-first language. The conclusion of her argument is that whichever term, or within reason, whichever other term the person in question prefers is fine, specifically because we are diversely enabled, different. With her customary lucidity, Stella writes, "Disability is created by the barriers we encounter in society, like buildings with no lifts or information not being provided in formats we can access. To say that a person has a disability is to say that these barriers are our responsibility. My disability exists not because I use a wheelchair, but because the broader environment isn't accessible." And with her customary wry humour, Stella adds, "I find the concept of having to clarify my status as a person extraordinarily condescending. No one else is ever asked to qualify their status as a person. Gay men and women are not people with homosexuality. Women are not people who are female. Footballers are not people who play football. I've met a lot of disabled people in my time, and not once have I ever met someone whose impairment is so profound that their status as a person is in doubt." I would add only two simple points to that wonderful piece of writing. We are who we are, and we are how we are. Whether we were born in some respect disabled or acquired our disability along the way, none of us chose to be disabled as a way of seeking attention. We are not big-noting ourselves, but we are human beings also, and we will not be ashamed of ourselves. We tend to think of Helen Keller as the blind American who wrote books. People in her time marvelled at her because of what she could do despite being disabled, or handicapped, as they said a century ago. But as a writer, she was far from being disabled. She was gifted, as are we all. But we are also diverse, as I said earlier. Among our speakers this morning is a woman who would like there to be more Elsies in the world, people who stop and ask if she is all right. If this adds a layer of complexity to the topic of how others should treat us, well, my answer would be the world is a complex place. And there is a world of difference between politely asking if everything's all right and barging into other people's space, physically or figuratively, without asking. And so, I would like to welcome my mother here. Mum, great to see you here. Wonderful to see you here. And to introduce the three presenters who over the next hour are going to give you their individual perspectives on the need for an NDIS and what type of service that will provide to the roughly 20% of our Australian population, 1 in 5 out of 23 million, who are defined as disabled, diversely enabled. Our first speaker this morning is Leah Hobson. At the end of her powerful article published on the ABC's Ramp-Up website a couple of months ago, just after the murder of Jill Marr, a couple of kilometres from where Leah lives, she described herself as a policy wonk, Labrador wangler. Hello, what is the Labrador's name? Ellie. Hello, Ellie. This is Ken, Ellie, Ken, right. And wine drinker, usually in that order. Ellie's a teetotaler, yes? Right. Perhaps she didn't feel the need to state two more W's. Wonderful writer, congratulations. If you are looking for a persuasive argument as to why we should not be paralysed by fear, as well as from any other cause, I would direct your attention to that article, which is now archived at www.abcnet.net.au/Leah bonyhady.com/ramp-up/articles. Following her will be Mr. Bruce Bonyhady. As a result of my research, I am prepared to bet that Bruce would agree with me that the I is the most important letter in the NDIS, that it should be regarded as we regard other forms of insurance, not as a lunatic waste of money, but as a prudent investment in protecting ourselves and those who are dearest to us in all the world. If so, you couldn't be hearing from someone better equipped to make the case and explain in detail how the NDIS will look. For Bruce, the chairman of Uralla and a founder member of the National Disability Service, a forerunner of the current scheme that was set up at the 2020 summit in 2008, has a background in funds management and insurance, and is the father of 3 boys, or rather 3 young men, 2 of whom, but enough. I don't want to steal Bruce's thunder. He's more than capable of explaining the depth of his interest in these issues. In that respect, certainly not disabled. Finally, before breaking for morning tea, we will hear from John Mckenna about what those who use the scheme will want of it and what they can expect of it. Again, who better to tell us? John is disabled, or a person with a disability. Perhaps he has a different view to Stella on that. But what distinguishes him from the masses is that he is a constant communicator and commentator on all manner of disability issues. Anyone who has visited his website, which functions as a privately run version of what the ABC is attempting with Ramp Up, will feel that they have known John for years. He is challenging but personable, stimulating without being opinionated, and how many of us can boast of having our own personal cartoonist? John can. So, without further ado, I will yield the microphone to our first speaker, Leah Hobson, who works at the Australian Federation of Disability Organisations, and who will inform us why we need an NDIS and what it will provide for the rest of our lives that is missing from them now. Thank you, Leah.